Today we're going to be playing Goblin Rally. This deck is a beatdown deck centered around the Goblin clan. And at the top end, though, we are playing the card Rally the Ancestors. So let's take a peek at Rally the Ancestors and talk about what this card does and why it's in the deck. So Rally the Ancestors, 2 white and X. Return each creature card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Exile those creatures at the beginning of your next upkeep. Exile Rally the Ancestors. It is an instant. Now, the way this card works is if you play during your opponent's end step, when you untap, there's a trigger that goes on the stack. When that trigger resolves, every creature that was returned with Rally goes away. That means that it's just a very brief moment in time where those creatures are viable, and we must find ways to use those bodies for good. You're going to want to bring back creatures that have haste. You're going to want to leverage the bodies themselves with sacrifice effects, and you're going to want to have some amount of self-mill or looting so that you actually can make the Rally of the Ancestors good without needing a sacrifice outlet necessarily. This build uses Rally of the Ancestors as like a combo kill element after a very exhaustive interactive game. But you have tons of ways to use the Rally of the Ancestors for value over the course of the early turns, the mid turns, the late turns. It's just a very powerful card that essentially just refreshes your battlefield for a blink of an eye. And it's your goal and your job to make sure that you can kill your opponent when you cast the Rally of the Ancestors. And here's how we're going to do it. First and foremost, we have Skirk Prospector. Skirk Prospector allows you to sack any goblin for a red mana. That means once you cast Rally of the Ancestors, if you bring back 6 goblins, you're essentially able to create 6 mana immediately. And we can use so much of that mana to do tons of different things in the deck. You're going to see Skirk Prospector have some really awesome combo kills. And I think that the card that it's going to work the best with is going to be Battlecry Goblin. Battlecry Goblin is a 2-mana 2/2. You can spend a red and 1 to give all your goblins +1/+0 and haste until end of turn. And then pack tactics whenever it attacks. If you attacked with creatures with total power 6 or greater this combat, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token that's tapped and attacking. So this card is good early because if it gets to attack with 6 power with the stuff, you get a token. It's great in the late game because you can give it haste and anything else haste to enter the battlefield that turn. Battlecry Goblin is going to be one of your primary combo cards with Rally of the Ancestors. For just 2 mana after you cast Rally of the Ancestors, you can give all those goblins haste and attack. And we're going to be looking to do that with mana sometimes, but we're also going to be looking to do it with Skirk Prospector once we put it back on the battlefield. We have many ways to enable the Skirk Prospector as well. One of my favorites is actually Cacophony Scamp. So Cacophony Scamp, 1 mana, 1/1. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may sacrifice it if you do proliferate. We don't really have that much to proliferate. We do have Fable of the Mirror Breaker, but that's not a priority. What is a priority is it dying. So when you attack, you can sack it even if there's nothing to proliferate on, and you can use that sacrifice effect to kill something like an opposing Llanowar Elves or small creature. Cacophony Scamp is a newer addition to the format and a great addition to the deck. And I think that that with Skirk Prospector and sometimes some Rally of the Ancestors can do some serious damage. We're going to be looking to pump its power a little bit with a couple different effects that we'll talk about later. So, Foundry Street Denizen is another card that works well in the Goblin Shell because whenever you play a threat, the Foundry Street Denizen gets a buff. This 1 mana 1/1 can attack for large chunks of damage in the early turns, but once you cast Rally of the Ancestors, it's going to get enormous. And when you pair this with something that can give it trample, it's going to essentially do a ton of damage, and it allows you to find combo kills with Rally of the Ancestors that don't involve Skirk Prospector or Battlecry Goblin. Because if you have a couple Foundry Street Denizens in play and you play Rally of the Ancestors, they get a huge buff for all those creatures entering the battlefield. Legion Loyalist is going to be our 1 mana 1/1 with haste. Whenever it attacks with at least 2 other creatures you control gain first strike and trample until end of turn. And can't be blocked by creature tokens. So this one pairs nicely with Foundry Street Denizen to offer a big attack with first strike and trample. So it makes it very difficult for your opponent to have a good combat step. These are our 1-drops that we're focusing on. I'm a big fan of the Skirk Prospector with Rally. I'm a big fan of the Cacophony Scamp in general. Foundry Denizen was not in the initial build that I saw for this deck, but I think it fits nicely with the rally package. And overall, I've been really happy with Foundry Denizen as a clock in most matchups. Our 2 drops outside of the Battlecry Goblin, which is our primary combo kill with Rally, we're going to be playing Goblin Instigator. This 2-mana 1/1 creates a goblin when it enters the battlefield. That is extremely good with Rally the Ancestors and Skirk Prospector because we're able to essentially generate extra bodies. And all you really want when you play a deck like Goblins is extra bodies because those bodies can be translated into actual effects later on. The Instigator plays defense nicely. You know, that combined with Skirk Prospector allows for some big bursts of mana in the later turn, so keep an eye on that. One of the newest lords printed for Goblins is Runvelt Hordemaster. I think that this is one of the best cards in the deck, if not the best card in the deck. So Runvelt Hordemaster, 2-mana 1/1, Goblin Warrior. Other goblins you control get +1/+1. Whenever Runvelt Hordemaster or another goblin you control dies, exile the top card of your library. If it's a goblin creature card, you may cast that card until the end of your next turn. Runvelt Hordemaster, along with Skirk Prospector, allows for some really cool chains where you can play a bunch of stuff off the top of the deck. Every 1-mana creature you hit off of that lets you cast it for free with Skirk Prospector, which lets you go again. And you can kind of do a mini chain sometimes to fill the graveyard for Rally the Ancestors. I wouldn't be surprised if you end up seeing at least 1 or 2 games end where I sack a bunch of things with a Runvelt Hordemaster in play, cast Rally the Ancestors, do it all again, and essentially mill over my whole deck, and maybe cast most of the creatures in my deck, depending on how much white mana we have access to when we do the Rally the Ancestors. Lastly, for the creature package, I want to talk about Conspicuous Snoop. This 2-mana creature, you play the top card of your library revealed, and you may cast goblin spells from the top of your library. As long as the top card of your library is a goblin card, Conspicuous Snoop gains all abilities of that card. This works with Skirk Prospector on the last bit. It also works with Battlecry Goblin, but for the most part, you're just going to be using Conspicuous Snoop as a card advantage engine. Against matchups where your opponent hits your stuff, you're going to be casting them pretty aggressively off the top of the deck instead of from the hand, because you want to essentially just generate bodies. You don't really care where they come from. You don't really care what they do. You just want raw resources, and Conspicuous Snoop is great for doing that. Last up is, one of the best cards in Magic right now. Not necessarily Pioneer, but definitely for Pioneer, definitely for Standard. Is Fable the Mirror Breaker. 3 mana, you make a 2/2 goblin. Whenever that goblin attacks, you get a treasure. The second chapter, you discard up to 2 cards, and then you draw that mini. That's great for fueling the graveyard for Rally the Ancestors. And then lastly, when it transforms, you get Reflection of the Kiki Jiki, which can copy any other creature in play, and it gains haste, and then you sack it at end of turn. This card, honestly, might not even belong in the deck. I think Goblin Warchief might deserve the slot over Fable the Mirror Breaker, but Fable's really powerful. It allows you to play a really attrition-heavy game plan, and it allows you to get out of mana floods or mana screws with ease. It is not a creature, so Rally the Ancestors cannot bring it back, but that just means to me that Rally the Ancestors will always be X equals 2 or less. So that turns Rally the Ancestors into almost a Collected Company of sorts, and we have played Collected Company in Goblins a few weeks ago, and it was pretty good. I'm thinking Rally is going to be way better for the combo elements. Collected Company doesn't really work well when you're casting Collected Company and hitting 1-mana creatures. That's why whenever you see a Collected Company deck, it's usually full of really powerful 2 and 3 drops. And Goblin just doesn't really have that in spades. Like we said, most of the cards are just fodder. But that's Goblins as a clan. So the mana base is pretty straightforward. We're playing a ton of red-white dual lands, Battlefield Forge, Inspiring Vantage, Sacred Foundry. Needleverge Pathway is going to be on red probably 90% of the time, but if it's your 4th mana source for the 2nd white for Rally the Ancestors, you're going to really be thankful that you have Needleverge over Mountain. And since we're not playing Chain to the Rocks, I think playing Needleverge over Mountain is great. 3 copies of Den of the Bugbear and 3 copies of Mountain round out the mana base for 22 total lands. The Den of the Bugbears get really big when you get Runvelt Hordemaster on the table because it pumps both the land itself and the 1/1 that you get off the attack. So keep an eye on Den of the Bugbear to close out some games when your opponent hits you with sweepers, for games where we don't draw Rally or they get taken from us with discard. The sideboard, we have 4 copies of Rending Volley. This card is excellent for defending against things like Greasefang, Spirits, and mono white aggro. I believe that Rending Volley is the most valuable sideboard card in all of Pioneer at the moment, and I think every red deck should be playing 4. I've been extremely happy with 4 copies in every single red deck I've played in the last couple months, and it's been very good. 3 copies of Unlicensed Hearse is going to give you a little bit of leeway against decks like Greasefang or other decks that use the graveyard. It's okay against Neoform because you can keep their graveyard contained so they can't get those Delve creatures down quickly. Overall, Unlicensed Search just a powerful sideboard card. However, if you supplanted this with something like Leyline of the Void, I would not really bat an eye. I think that any sort of graveyard removal here would be fine. Even something like Tormod's Crypt or Soul Guide Lantern, I think, would be reasonable. But Unlicensed Hearse being a potential creature later in the game with the crew effect, I think, is powerful. We have 4 copies of Goblin Chain Whirler. Goblin Chain Whirler is going to be our primary sideboard card against decks like Elves, creature-based decks that have tons of 1 toughness creatures, opposing mono-white strategies that play Thalia and a ton of other 1 toughness things. Goblin Chain Whirler is just a powerful card, and I think more red decks should be playing it in the sideboard when the triple red's not an issue. At least 2. I think the deal 1 to everything effect is wanted in a lot of matchups, and the body that comes along with it is especially desirable in this build because we are playing goblins and gets buffed by things like Horde Master. You can cast it off a Conspicuous Snoop. It's just a home run sideboard card. Lastly, kind of a pivot sideboard card, we're playing Thalia, Garden of Thraben. This 2-mana 2/1 first strike makes all non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. This is going to be a nice sideboard card against combo decks like your Lotus Fields, control decks like Blue White, and it's going to be really tough for a lot of people to beat because you have such powerful starts with Founder Street Denizen. Even Runvelt Horde Master with a couple creatures into Thalia on turn 3 is fine. This is Boros Goblins, Rally Goblins, whatever you want to call it. We'll call it Rally Goblins. But let's go ahead and play a league and see how the deck does. All right, so some post-game thoughts. Fable the Mirror Breakers got to go. It didn't really do much. We empty our hand too quickly for it to be truly great for the discard 2. And the backside's not even that good in our deck. We just have very little to do with the extra thing. It's just Runvelt Horde Master or in a Cacophony Scamp is basically it. The Row of the Ancestors felt cool. We did a really nice win in game number 1 with it. But other than that, I don't think we cast it a single time. And one time we drew it and it was bad, and the rest of the time we drew it, it didn't do much. I think that's going to be a common thing when you just don't self-mill. It's hard to explain. Like, Rally feels like it should be good, especially if you've played with like Patriarch's Bidding Goblins in the past. But mostly we didn't have a way to fill our graveyard very much. And when the deck doesn't draw lands, it just doesn't do much of anything. And when it draws too many lands, it doesn't do much of anything. It's just a really weird spot to be. So I think I'll probably end up going back to the Collected Company version and just going heavy on 3-drops with a bunch of things like Squee or Runvelt, or not Runvelt, Hobgoblin Bandit Lord, and maybe some other stuff. Anywho, that's going to do it for Rally Goblins. Thanks for watching. Make sure to hit the like and subscribe button on your way out, and we'll see you next time.